Good evening. I'm Leslie Greenbowman, president of the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, which has owned and operated Monticello since 1923. I'm standing here in the Monticello dining room, where Jefferson convened friends, family, students, and statesmen for dinners Daniel Webster described as half Virginian, half French style, in good taste and abundance. We hope that you, numbered among the more than 200,000 guests we have hosted so far this year at Monticello. And if you haven't visited yet, there is still time. While we continue to operate under increased safety precautions, we look forward to welcoming you and your families and friends in person. For tonight, as you watch from home, we are delighted to bring pieces of Monticello to you directly as we share an insider's look at our newest publication, Thomas Jefferson at Monticello: Architecture, Landscape, Collections, Books, Food, Wine. I want to start by sharing our immense gratitude to you, our supporters. Last year, we promised that we would emerge stronger from this pandemic, and we have. Thanks to your contributions, many of them greater than ever before, we quickly adapted to change and continued to fulfill our dual mission of preservation and education, online and on site. In August, we unveiled a new tour of Monticello and Jefferson's Mountaintop. This new 45-minute guided experience includes first-floor spaces in Thomas Jefferson's home, the West Lawn, and the South Wing. And we have acquired objects belonging to Jefferson and gotten them back home to Monticello, including his watch key, used daily to wind his watch. This key was a memento mori, inscribed with the date he lost his beloved wife, Martha. It even contains a lock of hair believed to be hers, and it's now on display in Jefferson's bedchamber. Our robust virtual programming has continued each week, including live streams with first-person interpreter Bill Barker, Monticello experts, and special guests and digital field trips for classrooms across the globe. In all, Monticello's digital offerings have been viewed more than 1 million times in the last year and a half. It has also been a year of publications. Andrew Jackson O'Shaughnessy, Monticello's vice president and the Saunders director of the Robert H. Smith International Center for Jefferson Studies, released his latest book called The Illimitable Freedom of the Human Mind: Thomas Jefferson's Idea of a University. And last month, we published the book we are discussing this evening, Thomas Jefferson at Monticello: Architecture, Landscape, Collections, Books, Food, Wine. This visually stunning new publication explores Monticello, both the house and plantation, with essays that illuminate Jefferson's contributions to the arts and the culture of a young nation. I'm honored to have had the opportunity to work with Monticello trustee Charlotte Moss to edit this volume. It features thoughtful essays from leaders in their respective fields, including Annette Gordon-Reed, Carla Hayden, Jay McInerney, John Meacham, Xavier Salomon, Gil Schaefer, Alice Waters, and Thomas Waltz. These contributions are paired with exquisite images by renowned art photographer Miguel Flores Viana, who captures Monticello in beautiful and thought-provoking photographs. I recently spoke with Miguel and with award-winning landscape architect Thomas Waltz about their role in this publication and how our culture continues to reflect Jefferson's tastes and deep influence. Before I share our conversations with all of you, I would like to introduce our esteemed chair of our Board of Trustees, Melody Barnes, to share her thanks with you personally.
Good evening. I'm Melody Barnes, chair of the Thomas Jefferson Foundation's Board of Trustees. On behalf of my fellow board members, we are so grateful for your ongoing support of Monticello. In a year that's presented many ongoing challenges, you have stood by us in unprecedented ways ensuring we continue to fulfill our mission of preservation and education. Whether you've joined us online or on site this year, your ongoing engagement in our work allows us to share with the global audience Jefferson's thoughts, ideas, and world, as well as the critically important stories and experiences of all who lived and labored here, free and enslaved. Thank you for joining us for this evening's program. We look forward to welcoming you back to the mountains soon.
It's my great pleasure to be having a conversation this evening with a world-renowned art photographer, Miguel Flores-Viana. Miguel is joining us from London. Hi, Miguel.
Hi, Leslie. How are you?
Beside me is the book that his genius has helped us produce here at Monticello. The title of the book is Thomas Jefferson at Monticello, Architecture, Landscape Collections, Books, Food, Wine. And it was a labor of love for everyone involved. Miguel, tell us a little bit about your love affair with Monticello, which ultimately led to this publication.
Yes, of course. The love affair begins with Jefferson. I love the man, and I admire all his many gifts as a politician, as a statesman, as a diplomat, as an architect, as a garden person, as a botanist, and obviously always wanted to see Monticello. However, it took me 20 years to get to Monticello from the time that I moved to the United States. And when I finally saw it in a beautiful fall day, the love affair increased by a lot. I really thought that the place is incredible. What he created for himself, that world that he created for himself, was totally mesmerizing to me. And I came back to Europe very much not only impressed, because I had already been impressed, but really sort of thinking of what one could do with Monticello in order to continue to promote what he did in that place. So I work a lot here in Europe with a magazine called Cabana, and Cabana at the time was in the process of putting together an American issue, and I said actually, there should not be any American issue without Monticello. So that's why I returned the following spring, and I spent 2 wonderful days with you and everybody that works there, sort of going through the rooms and photographing them and going through some of his personal objects that belong to him personally. So it was quite wonderful, and that's how it all started.
I want to say that although this is a book about Jefferson and the arts, it's also an art book in its own right, because it features the extraordinary talent of your eye and your genius with a camera. So I want to thank you for giving us really 2 art books in one. Talk a little bit about how it was to be up on the mountain at dawn and at daybreak and all over the gardens, the roof. What do you remember most about those crazy days when we were trying to juggle you and the public and get the shots you wanted?
Well, it was a little bit unreal in the sense that there were times that I was conscious that I was experiencing things that only the people who lived there one time experienced it. I mean, there were times in which, for example, I was almost on my own in some of the rooms that he inhabited, and to me that's an amazing gift, to be able to see things that way from a very private perspective.
I want to come back to the love affair you had for Monticello in your work, because it really was the wellspring, the inspiration for this book. When we thought about doing a new book with Rizzoli on Monticello and Jefferson's contributions to the arts, and when you agreed to provide the photography, that really was the moment when we realized we needed your peers in these other fields to provide the text, that only those who were equal to your status in each of these fields could hold their own with a book with such beautiful artistry. So It really has been a love affair for everybody involved, and it was a joy to go to the contributors and ask them if they would write about what Jefferson's contributions in a given field meant to them and their work. And you did that visually. We were just so amazed and enthralled with some of the beautiful detail shots. You opened eyes to Monticello. Visitors walk by some of these things every day and never see them the way you brought them to life in the book. Thinking about things like that wonderful bonnet of Jefferson's daughter, or his personal implements, the music. Talk a little bit about how you would go into a room and what would govern your eye and your selections.
Well, it's twofold. On the one hand, you walk into a room and you sort of individualize certain things that you believe may be important to the room, either a piece of furniture or something on the wall. But what in the end guides me the most is atmosphere. And this is what I try to sort of recreate in the images, try to capture in the images, which is the atmosphere that certain rooms have. And it's not easy sometimes when you go to historical places, because the person who may have lived there has been gone for a long time. And yet in Monticello, in those early hours of the morning or at the end of the afternoon, you can still capture that. Sort of the man is still somehow floating around. And I don't know if it is I don't know what it is. It's the chemistry of everything. It's the people that work there. It's his voice and his message that comes so strong when it comes to rooms are still there. And I think I don't know if I capture that properly, but I try to do my best. I also wanted to say that for me, it was an extreme honor to be asked to do this, because, he was our third president. He is, he's a giant. And to be able to sort of walk behind his footsteps with my camera was an extreme honor and an immense pleasure.
And you talk about something we call power of place. I feel it too here, especially in the early mornings before before the visitors arrive. You almost feel as though Jefferson's just gone around the corner of the house and you're going to meet up with him any minute. You brought that power of place to these photographs that you took. One of the details that you shot that I find so compelling is a detail about the other inhabitants of Monticello. So Jefferson, of course, lives here with his family in the manor house, but there are at any one moment 130, 140 human beings that are enslaved by him, who are making Monticello possible. And one of those shots, and I just would love to have you tell me what it was like to take that shot, is a brick with the fingerprints of a child, an enslaved child, who was helping to make the bricks for the house.
It's very powerful, and it's almost like the stroke of a painter. I mean, almost like time doesn't exist when you are faced with things like that, because that child left the imprint dried, and there you're looking at it, and nobody has polished it, nobody has done anything to make it look better. It's just the way it was, and there's something incredibly powerful about that, and incredibly human too, because it sort of, in a way, makes you face the reality of Monticello. So in a way, that hand, that imprint, represents all the people who worked and toiled there for many years, making the place, first of all, come to be, and then to sort of flourish the way it did.
That's right. They are responsible for the beauty of Monticello. Jefferson designed it, he conceived it, but without his enslaved carpenters, without the enslaved gardeners, without the enslaved chefs, without the assistance of this enormous number of people Monticello wouldn't exist, nor would he have had the time to conceive of all these things that he did in his lifetime. Annette Gordon-Reed, in her introduction, talks about the fact that when, with the help of enslaved people, he could accomplish so much more. So I think this book is really, it's a testament not merely to Jefferson's eye and his aesthetics and his contributions, but really to so many individuals. We know some of their names, regrettably not all, who made this beauty possible. Miguel, do you have a favorite room at Monticello?
There are many. The one that I keep on sort of thinking about, because to me it was a revelation, and it was a revelation almost at the end of the third week of shooting, or the third time that I went back to Monticello to shoot. And it may seem obvious, but for me, it was a revelation for different things. And it's the parlor. And let me explain why. So I had seen in America many sort of colonial historical houses. You know, I used to live in New York, so I've seen quite a few up the Hudson Valley, and then I've seen some in the Virginia, in the state of Virginia as well. And there is a certain stiffness to the way those houses were sort of furnished. Most of them sort of furnished with American furniture that came from different places, Boston or Philadelphia. And one doesn't get that feeling when one is in Monticello. Monticello is not a stiff place in terms of design. It feels like, provided you add a few things, anybody could move in and feel totally comfortable even today. And it was only when I shot the parlor that I understood why. So I left the parlor to shoot for last, because I wanted to see how the light worked throughout the day there. And while shooting it, I realized, or I think this is my explanation, why the house does not feel stiff. And it is because because at the time he furnishes that room with things that had come from France, from the United States, and even something that was designed using a Mexican chair as an inspiration. So there's a certain sort of organicity. This is quite organic in a way. It's a grand room, but it's quite organic and it's quite relaxed. And if I may say so, it's almost like that you could say that Jefferson was, in a way, a little bit of a bohemian in the way he put those rooms together. So he was a sort of bohemian ahead of his time. So the house doesn't feel stiff. The house feels completely relaxed to me, and it seems like a little cabinet of curiosities, room after room. And I guess that's the reason to me why the parlor is interesting, because to me the parlor in a way encapsulates that whole philosophy that he sort of displayed throughout all the rooms in the house.
So you were working with the light, which is always challenging. You were working in a house that never closes. You were working odd hours to capture the rooms without our visitors. And you shot hundreds of pictures in very few days. I think you came 3 times, and each time only for about 4 days. And in order for the book to have, I think, the almost 100 images it does, I can only imagine there were at least 400 or 500 images that you shot, because I remember looking through them all, and we were, so excited about which ones to choose. And then what made it so incredibly spectacular is the way in which you assembled these images as a walk through the house. And it was, again, you were giving the visitor your sense of love as you came through these rooms. I remember you in the hall particularly, and the light coming through, and the antlers, as you said, and the map, and then the antique sculpture of Ariadne, all coming together in that beautiful light.
Yeah, to me, besides taking the picture, sometimes because I have been a magazine editor, I often try to think of what would make whoever is looking at those pages understand what they're looking at, because it's very easy to just make amazing pictures, but you should help the reader see where he is or where he's going. So I tried to think that way, that it was sort of the book should somehow have the feel of someone who goes through the house for the first time, seeing room after room. And I think we sort of follow the tour of Monticello, because from the entrance hall you go to his library, and then to his study, and then the bedroom. And the other thing that I have to say that for me was an incredible revelation is that I knew that you were going to have essays, and I remember going for the third time, and I remember we met for dinner before I started shooting that third sort of week that I was there. And I was amazed at the essays, because they were so beautiful and so well informed. And when the book came together, it's the first time I've done a book that is just not only images. I love the fact that how the essay and the images have sort of, in a way, sort of now intertwined and created one single voice. And to be honest, now I think I want to do books like that, to get someone to write, amazing text, and you illustrate it. Because it was really, for me, it was a discovery, and I have to say that I loved it. It's really great. I think that the people at Rizzoli were so helpful in sort of making me understand how things work when you work that way. I was just used to books where you have like one image per page, and you say, well, no, sometimes we're going to have different things. But I think it worked out, and I think it looks. If I may say so, I think the book turned out quite okay.
Oh my goodness, it's so much more than okay. Mm-hmm. Miguel, is there anything you'd like me to ask you that I haven't, or that you'd like to talk about?
All projects like this are a collaboration, but you guys gave me access to everything. It was unbelievable to be able to go to those rooms. I'm going to use the word storage, but that sounds too sacrilegious. And to say, look around and say, what is that? And they would tell me exactly what it is and what is that. And then to be able to select those things and bring them to photograph them in the same way that how you got that beautiful tombstone out of an exhibition in Richmond. It was really amazing. It was because you guys gave it your all, sort of thing. And it was a very satisfying experience, and I'm glad you guys are happy with the book, and I'm glad the other authors are happy, and for me it's a real honor. And on top of that, it's just the most beautiful place.
Well, thank you, Miguel. I think it's the most beautiful art book ever done on Monticello, and I'm honored to have my name associated with it. And one of the greatest pleasures of all was just getting to know you and getting to see the genius of your work. Miguel Flores Viana, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you to everybody at Monticello, and I hope to be back there sometime soon. Thank you.
It is my delight to welcome you to the East Front of Monticello and meet my friend Thomas Waltz.
Hello, Leslie.
How are you?
I'm great. It's wonderful to be here with
you. So you have been part of just this extraordinary venture where we asked luminaries like you in different fields in which Thomas Jefferson excelled to talk about Jefferson and his influence collectively on the arts. And we're thrilled the book has come out, and I can't thank you enough for writing on landscape. And I loved your conclusion, which I had never thought about, that Jefferson was actually pioneering in your field.
Absolutely. It was part of the great pleasure of accepting this challenge of trying to offer some new glimpse into someone who is perhaps the subject of more scholarship than anyone in our country, the degree to which Jefferson had envisioned a complete and holistic landscape was very exciting to me, because too often we talk about Jefferson as a farmer, Jefferson as a gardener, but rarely is he presented as a holistic thinker about the very complex, thriving landscape that was created at Monticello.
You brought such insights into that. I confess to having aha moments myself. And I love the way you pulled it all together and showed us how he had a comprehensive vision for this landscape, which was on par with no one else at this time?
Not that I know of. And I think his ability to understand that the landscape is a bearer of meaning, that he is revealing content, he is telling you a story, he is building his own narrative, and he is exploring the nation of ideas that he was trying to create through his work in the landscape. So I think the circumnavigation of the little mountain is one of the most extraordinary things that he designed here. And for that era, the prowess in civil engineering, the understanding of grading and topography, but interweaving that with a very intentional narrative of agriculture, of wilderness, of the tended wild. I would
The
say,
tended
through the grove.
wild.
All of these are emotional landscape experiences that he is orchestrating and creating, while interwoven with the functional needs of the mountaintop.
Yeah. I think people forget that this was a plantation, a slave plantation.
Absolutely.
And everything had to be organized and considered.
But there is this route of labor that connected water to the house. Rather than a staircase or a straight route, this giant elliptical curve is really part of what connected life and the mountaintop. You know, one of the curious things that Andrea Wolf points out in her book is that he could have chosen a much more politically significant spot on the route to Richmond or Fredericksburg, something really adjacent to the river, easier navigation. But this idea of occupying the mountaintop and being able to survey the entire landscape, I think was a passion for him. And so the pragmatic things of, is there water, was kind of down on the list.
Well, and I loved your mentioning that arc from the North Spring up to Mulberry Row being the nucleus of enslaved workers. And rather than make it a purely functional route, he marries utility and beauty.
Always.
And I think that theme emerges in every essay in this book, as each of you who treated some aspect, whether wine, food, landscape, collections, architecture. Annette Gordon-Reed in her introduction talks about his ferme ornée, marriage of utility and beauty, and it's his laboratory for living idea is always there, but his aesthetic is governing as well, right? And then she talks about something that we must never forget, and I think it's easier and easier for audiences to grapple with it here, which is that the reason he had the time to do all that and think all that, he had at his bidding at any time 130, 140 human beings who, with animal labor assisting, made this mountain flat, right? Could cut those roads, could bring the water.
And as we talk about bringing greater visibility to the lives, the daily lives of the enslaved people that allowed Monticello to exist.
Exactly.
I think something like this route of labor becomes a very interesting, potentially future restoration project that can tell that story. And I think that authenticity in the landscape is something very important in today's world to connect people to allow people to hold hands briefly with history by standing in and on the authentic places of labor, to just for one moment create a deeper empathy.
That connection.
That connection. It's essential to not gloss over these landscapes. If we can increase the sense of connectivity between people, culture, and nature, we become stewards not just of ecologies, we become stewards of truer human stories because we understand them. We have touched a place where we know someone else's life unfolded.
That touches us today.
Absolutely.
Tended wild. So I want to pull those words to something you said in your essay, where you drew the parallel between Jefferson's push and pull with wild nature, and my words, not yours, taming it, forming it, shaping it to his vision. And you compared that a bit to what was happening in the colonies as they're shaping self-government, and the transition and the tension between anarchy, essentially, and a structured civilization, right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes. Democracy is messy business. Yeah. And so is the landscape.
Yeah.
And we do have these innate and natural tendencies that might veer towards the chaotic, towards the selfish, the individualistic. And I think those moments when we see ourselves as essential parts of a thriving ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem, is when we become our best selves as citizens. And the landscape has so many parallels to that. We know more and more all the time about the interconnectivity of plants through mycorrhizal fungi, through hyphae in the ground, the incredible networks that sustain a rich and diverse landscape that ultimately sustain our lives. And so seeing elements of the landscape as part of a whole, I think is very important, an important parallel to how we see ourselves as citizens. It takes some self-sacrifice to participate in a democracy if you're doing it right. We can't all be little tiny emperors. Yeah. And so that more holistic view, I think, is a very healthy approach. As far as the approach to this landscape, there was a deep respect for nature, but also a very aggressive boldness to something like removing a mountaintop. I would not advocate doing that again. Personally, don't think that's the best idea, but it did reveal this magnificent place.
Jefferson called Palladio's books his Bible. Maybe no one more than you, in the book at least, understands firsthand Jefferson's love affair with Palladio and Renaissance architecture. You have multiple degrees from the University of Virginia, a master's in architecture, a master's in landscape architecture. You studied in Vicenza. You lived 5 years in that area, studying really the wellspring of what Jefferson was doing here. And I think it bears reminding everyone that this house that's so familiar to us on the Nickel was, in Jefferson's words, the curiosity of the neighborhood. No house had ever looked like this at that time, not even in the more urban areas, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about your kindred understanding of this man's love of Italian Renaissance architecture?
Yeah, I found the audacity of Palladio such an interesting counterpoint to the Baroque and to the more emotional. There was suddenly this rational architecture rooted in the geometries that structure nature, the human body, these ideal proportions, the golden ratio, the golden mean, all of these things that Palladio was building his buildings on, and they carried meaning. There was an idea being conveyed through the architecture. Palladio's great innovation was taking the temple front, reserved for religious buildings, and applying it to a working agricultural building, and saying, this is villeggiatura, this is the improvement of the human soul through contact with productive agriculture. So thinking about the axial relationships of Monticello to the east, to Richmond, to the sea view, as it's come to be known from his bedroom that we're looking out at here, to Montalto, this quite pyramidal mountain just off the portico. to the view to the university that Jefferson was creating. Like in the Palladian rural villas, there were often these connections to a mountain in the distance, to the grid of the productive fields, and there's this blurring of the line of the pleasure garden to the productive garden, and I think that's what we see everywhere.
And when we look to Mont Alto, which is the higher mountain that actually is in the same very, very ancient mountain range on which Monticello is sited, Mont Alto is Jefferson's high mountain that overlooks his little mountain, Monticello, and he buys it before he's even finished Monticello 1. And I think most of our readers probably know there's Monticello 1 and Monticello 2. His life was changed by 5 years in Paris. He comes back, obviously, and changes Monticello, just as probably your views on architecture changed after 5 years in Italy, right?
Correct.
But he writes to his neighbor who owns Mont Alto, I want to buy as much of your mountain as can be seen from mine, and 100 yards
100 yards more, right.
And isn't this the first viewshed protection? At least we know of in America,
Yes.
certainly on the part of a founder. So we clearly, you don't buy a mountain for more fertile fields.
Correct.
But it is on the axis, right?
Right.
You're talking about how he's ordering and shaping and composing his vision for the world that he's developing. Talk a little bit about Mont Alto and what he wanted to do up there.
Well, yeah, he had some, like all of us, we travel and we want to find ways to incorporate these marvels that we see in the outside world into our daily lives. And sometimes they can be naive, sometimes they're brilliant and spectacular. This fantasy of a cascade coming down that would be visible from the West Portico, there would be this cascade of water down Mont Alto, which has no springs or natural flow of
Boss,
water.
we got a problem.
I was like, well, a little bit of a problem, but I think reality stepped in, and looking out to this spectacular landform must have been a satisfying thing. Maybe more in terms of the Palladian ideal of connecting viscerally to the forms of the earth.
He never got the water course because there was no water, but the willow walk.
Oh, that's the willow walk.
We exalt Jefferson for some things, we do not forgive him for others, and then we, I think, find his humanity sometimes in maybe a better idea than a reality, right?
The willow walk, I think, is an almost comical example of how many times we've replanted it to try to make it happen without finally just saying, he might have gotten this one wrong. But your point about historical accuracy is something that, the bulk of, that I think about all the time. Yeah. The bulk of our practice is public landscapes.
Listen to the gong.
Oh, it's so nice.
We're listening to the gong on top of the house, which is actually connected to that clock. I'm so sorry, Thomas, but for us to be able to share that on camera is really pretty exciting.
The reality of historic sites and the livability of historic sites. We're witnessing it right now. It's a beautiful moment. But it is something I think about a lot as we have been invited to work with many historic landscapes in Europe, Southeast Asia, and the United States. How do we adapt them to the 21st century realities? And one that is constantly on my mind is universal accessibility. It's one of the great tasks ahead.
We are dreaming and visioning how this country is going to engage with its 250th birthday in 5 years, right? And so, being a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the home of the man who gave this country and 160 countries around the world some part of their founding vision words, we think about that, and we think about how those words have been interpreted. He didn't mean life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for Native Americans. He didn't mean it for Africans. He didn't mean it for women. Right. But those words have been grabbed and procreated and changed societies here and around the world, and yet where are we on that arc of the moral universe? And so as we think about the 250th, we're very strongly focused on how we make those words matter more and make more sense here, even as we talk about the rest of the country. We hope that what happens at Monticello and the experience here and the tension we hold between slavery and freedom, we hope what we offer here in Holding Hands with History will drive conversations and visions on every citizen's part for the country that we still have not become,
Right.
but we could be.
Democracy is always the art of becoming,
Yeah.
it seems. Thank
Great
you for
to see
having
you,
me.
Thomas.
Wonderful to see you.
Thank you for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed my conversations with Thomas and Miguel. My thanks to them and to all our contributors for helping produce this latest volume on Jefferson and his world. As you begin thinking about your holiday shopping, this book is available at the Monticello shop, and it will make a lovely addition to any coffee table, nightstand, or bookshelf. As I stand here in this dining room that was once filled with friendship and laughter, I am reminded of Jefferson's whimsical invitation to his friend, Richard Peters, in 1791. Call on me in your turn whenever you come to town, and if it should be about the hour of 3, I shall rejoice the more. You will find a bad dinner, a good glass of wine, and a host thankful for your favor. We thank you for your favor and support. Come see us soon.